My name is Cheryl. I'm 68 years old and live alone in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Oregon. A place where I once planted lavender behind the porch and carefully preserved every family memory for more than 40 years. That morning the air was crisp. I threw on a worn-out sweater and decided to swing by the nearby bank to check on a medical insurance payment. No appointment. I didn't tell anyone. Just a strange gut feeling, like someone whispered in my ear that something wasn't right. I walked into the familiar VIP counter. And then I froze. Brad, my son-in-law, was sitting across from the branch manager, speaking in a calm voice as if he were reading a news report. Cheryl is no longer mentally competent. We're requesting a full freeze on her accounts, per certification from her physician and her legal guardian. I went numb when I saw the signature underneath. Emily. My daughter. What would you do if someone you loved tried to erase you from your own life with a few lies and a stack of paperwork? Leave a comment if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. Hit like if you believe it's never too late to fight for the truth. And don't forget to subscribe if you want to know what happened after I stepped out of the shadows and faced those who thought I would stay silent. Because what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment for a long time. I stood frozen behind the glass panel separating the waiting area from the VIP counter. No one saw me. They were all too focused on Brad, sitting upright, his expression cold and confident. Cheryl Matthews, he said clearly, gently, but each word felt like a blade slicing through the air. She's no longer fully aware. Lately, she's been mixing up family members' names, forgetting her home address, even wandering off in public. I tightened my grip on my purse. My ears rang with heat. Brad placed a thick folder on the glass table, neatly organized in a brown cover. We're just trying to follow procedure, he continued. There's a medical note from the family doctor and a power of attorney signed by her daughter, Emily Matthews. All documents are notarized. My name wrapped inside a blatant lie. Signed, Emily. I didn't mishear it. The bank manager, Joseph, a kind middle-aged man who had known me since I used to come in with my husband, flipped through the papers. He frowned. I could see hesitation in his eyes. Brad, he said softly, Cheryl has been a long-time client here. I've never noticed anything like what you're describing. Brad tilted his head slightly and smiled. A smile I had never seen him give anyone in our family. These symptoms can be subtle at first, Joseph. She can hide them, even confidently deny them. But the condition progresses quickly. If we don't act now, the financial consequences could be serious. I had heard enough. I stepped out from my hiding spot. Each footstep echoed off the bank's cold tile floor. The room went oddly quiet. Brad hadn't even turned to look yet when my voice cut through the silence, steady but sharp as a bell on a stormy day. Sounds like I'm learning quite a lot about myself today. Brad stiffened. Joseph looked up, his face pale. Mrs. I didn't know you were here. Neither did I cut him off, eyes fixed on Brad. That my own son-in-law would walk into a bank, carrying fake documents and try to declare me unfit to live my own life. Brad shot to his feet, lips twitching. Cheryl, we were just trying to protect you. I walked up to the counter, calm but firm, and pulled the file gently toward me. The paper was still warm. Protect me. I looked up. By telling a stranger I no longer recognize my own daughter? That I'm confused? And that stranger just happens to be her husband. Brad looked around, hoping someone would come to his defense. No one did. Joseph, I turned to the manager. I'm Cheryl Matthews. I am fully aware of where I am, why I came here, and who this man is standing in front of me, trying to deceive your bank to gain control of my assets. Joseph nodded, visibly relieved. I believe you. And I apologize for not being more cautious. No need to apologize, I replied, because the mistake isn't yours. Brad stepped forward. Cheryl, you're misunderstanding. This isn't some scheme. We just thought, in case something happened, the paperwork would be ready. I turned to him, no longer angry, just broken. You and Emily thought I wouldn't find out, I said slowly. But I've never been someone you could fool easily. You're wrong about me, Brad. I held the file in my hands, feeling the weight of it. Not just the pages, but the layers of lies, betrayal, and scheming that had quietly built up through the years I spent holding this family together. Don't call me Mom again, I whispered. Because someone who truly calls me that wouldn't use my name to build a paper prison. Brad stood frozen. I walked out of that bank without looking back. Sunlight hit my face as I stepped outside. I closed my eyes for a moment. The world kept spinning like nothing happened. But inside me something had cracked, and at the same time something else had risen. I didn't drive home right away. I pulled over on Maple Street near the park. The wind blew gently through the window. I opened the folder and read each word, each signature. There were documents I had never seen. Even my signature had been forged, blatantly. The first thing I felt wasn't anger. It was emptiness. I used to believe I was loved, trusted, respected as the root of this family. But no one respects a tree if they've already planned to cut it down to build another bedroom. I looked at the bold words "permanent guardianship" printed across the top page. Below it was Emily's signature. Right beside my birth date. The day I gave birth to her. Now used to certify that I no longer deserved ownership of my own life. I folded the file shut. The wind was still blowing outside. I thought of Lucy. My granddaughter. Did she know? I needed time. Not to calm down. To prepare. Because in that moment I knew, if I didn't stand up, no one else would. And I wouldn't let them bury me in silence. Not while I still had breath, a voice, and a truth that had yet to be told. I started the car. It was already midday. Long enough for them to believe I'd never find out. But the truth was, I was just getting started. I drove home slowly, hands clinging to the steering wheel like letting go might shatter me into pieces. Autumn wind brushed in through the cracked window, and the scent of rotting wood from the roadside trees brought me back to the fall when Emily was 10. She used to stuff dry leaves into my coat and laugh, "So you can bring the whole forest home, Mom." I used to think there were bonds that could never be broken. But sometimes, the ones we tie tightest are the very ones that blind us to who our loved ones really are. Emily is my only daughter. I gave birth to her on a bitter January night in a small hospital room in Eugene. When my husband died in an accident just a few years later, I didn't cry right away. I looked into Emily's teary eyes and promised myself, "You will never go without, no matter what I have to give up." I worked 3 jobs. By day I was a clerk at a notary office. At night I tutored math. On weekends I cleaned houses by the hour for people I knew. Emily grew up on simple meals filled with laughter, on long summers camping by the lake or picking berries behind the house. She was smart, kind, grateful. At least I believed she was. Brad came into the picture during her senior year of college. A charming young man, slightly awkward, soft-spoken. I remember the first dinner he had at our house. He brought a bouquet of pale yellow daisies and a slightly burnt apple pie. Emily looked at him like her heart had finally found its missing piece. I didn't interfere. Though I had doubts, I chose to trust. Because Emily looked happy. And after everything, I believed she deserved to be loved. They got married 2 years later in a simple ceremony in my backyard. I still have the light blue dress I wore that day hanging in the closet under the stairs. Brad never held a steady job. He bounced from retail, warehouse assistant, even tried opening a coffee shop chain that failed in under 6 months. I never complained. When they needed a down payment for their first house, I gave them $80,000. "Think of it as me investing in my daughter's happiness," I told Emily as I signed the check. She hugged me for a long time, eyes brimming with tears. "You're the best mom in the world," she whispered in my ear. At the time I thought I was building a nest for 3 generations. But I didn't realize, some people walk into a home not to build but to slowly change the locks. When Lucy was born, I spent almost all my time with her. I held her for her shots, rocked her to sleep at night so Emily could rest, made chicken soup when Brad was sick, and quietly cleaned the kitchen after their half-finished dinners. I never asked for thanks. Being there was enough. But slowly things changed. Emily's calls became sparse. Instead there were short, dry text. "Too busy, Mom. I'll call next week." "Lucy's got homework, maybe next time." I sat alone on the porch steps, listening to the wind chimes ring gently like a reminder of my daughter's growing absence. Then one day when I offered to pick Lucy up from school like I usually did, Emily hesitated. "Mom, lately Lucy's been a bit hard to manage. You're getting older. I'm just worried you can't keep up." I froze. Not because of the refusal but because of the unfamiliar tone coming from the same daughter I once cradled in my arms. "You're saying I can't keep up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily quickly corrected herself. I mean, you should rest more. I don't want you getting tired. You need full-time care now. I forced a small smile. Just a few years ago, I was climbing up to patch the chimney and driving Brad to interviews after their car broke down on the highway. And now I was being treated like a broken clock, tucked away in a drawer no longer useful. I started noticing the glances they tried to hide. Brad no longer called me Mom. He switched to Cheryl, cold and detached. Emily stared down at her phone every time I asked a question. My house, the one once filled with laughter from 3 generations, had turned silent. I wondered what I had done wrong. Was I too devoted? Too forgiving? Or had I simply grown old and become inconvenient to the very people I gave my youth to raise? Those questions swirled in my mind like the season's first breeze, gentle but cold. I began journaling again. Not to complain, but to write down all the little things they thought I wouldn't notice. The dinner Emily invited me to but didn't pull up a chair. My birthday, when Lucy handed me flowers and left quickly because Mom said not to stay long. Brad's careless comment during dinner. If an old lady still insists on making all the decisions, who's going to take care of her when she loses her mind? I smiled when he said it, but my hand was clenched around the spoon, knuckles white. I didn't argue, but I recorded every word, every act. Not to use against them, but to remind myself that I was still here. That I saw. That I felt. And most importantly, that I hadn't lost myself. They thought I wouldn't notice. But I had always noticed. And somewhere along the line I realized, it was my silence that gave them the courage to go this far. I got home just as the kitchen clock ticked to 3:17 in the afternoon. The late autumn sun spilled softly on the porch steps, tinting the old wood grain a golden hue. I paused at the door, gripping the folder from the bank. It was no longer just a stack of paper. It was proof of everything I had refused to believe for too long. I sat at the dining table, where just a few years ago, the air was filled with laughter, the smell of baked pies, and my granddaughter's adoring gaze. Now only silence remained and the trembling sheets beneath my hands. I opened the folder. The first page was a mental capacity assessment, signed by someone named Dr. Gregory Niles, a man I'd never met. The report claimed I frequently confused information, could no longer care for myself, showed signs of mild paranoia, and required full guardianship to prevent self-harm. I turned to the next page. A petition for permanent guardianship. Petitioner, Emily Matthews. Proposed legal guardian, Brad Matthews. Below was my signature, right next to my name, neat and firm. But I had never signed it. It looked exactly like mine. Too exact. Perfect enough to make my spine go cold. I still had all my old bank records where I'd always signed paper statements by hand. I knew whether my loops leaned left or right, how sharp my downstrokes were. The signature in that file didn't shake. It was flawless. Too flawless to be real. I turned another page. Property transfer documents. For the house I lived in and the northern plot of farmland I'd once used to grow alfalfa, later leased to a young family for a community garden. I saw the line, transfer of ownership from Cheryl Matthews to Emily Matthews and Brad Matthews. Joint ownership with full asset control. The signing date was 2 weeks ago. The same weekend Emily said she was busy taking Lucy camping and couldn't visit. I couldn't remember the last time I'd had more than a 3-sentence conversation with Emily without being interrupted. But now all those unfinished conversations were spelled out in ink before me. A rushed handwritten note read, "Finalize by November 15th. Can begin listing if guardianship is court approved." I took a deep breath and turned to the last section. A stack of printed emails. The sender's address was unfamiliar. Mitchell Gray LLP. Subject, Quick Sale Post-Guardianship Approval. The body of the email detailed exchanges between Brad and his private attorney discussing how to list assets under estate sale, prioritize selling the main property for quick liquidity, and transfer proceeds into a secondary account at First Central under Emily's name. I read each word like swallowing ice. I wasn't dead. I wasn't sick. I was sitting right here, fully aware. And yet they were preparing to erase me from my own life. No warning. No questions about how I was doing. They signed. They forged. They planned to sell off every piece of my life like I was nothing but a faded shadow. I laid my hand on the table, trying to steady my breath. When was the last time Emily hugged me? Lucy's birthday last year. I gave her the original Harry Potter book set and Emily said, "It's fine, but she prefers tech stuff." I was used to being seen as old-fashioned, out of touch. But I never thought I'd be seen as such a burden I needed to be legally replaced. I sat there a long time as the light outside shifted to amber. I didn't cry. Maybe I had no tears left after all those years of being a single mom, a caretaker, a homemaker. But one thing was clear: the line had been crossed. And this time no one had the right to rewrite my story but me. I folded the folder shut. Gently. As if holding a piece of myself I'd just dug out from a long-buried grave. I stood up and poured a glass of water, hands slightly trembling. Every sip was an effort to calm the storm building in my chest. Outside the window, Lucy was riding her bike along the pine trail. I knew she liked looping around the old garden where we used to camp when she was 4. She was still carefree. Still innocent. And she had no idea her parents were trying to take everything I had saved for her future. I quietly stepped outside. I didn't call her name. I didn't wave. I just watched her and silently promised I wouldn't let her grow up surrounded by lies, unaware she had the choice to live in truth. I came back inside, locked the door and placed the folder in the secret drawer under the stairs. The one where I kept my husband's old letters. I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and wrote a few lines in thin, deliberate strokes. "I'm still alive. I'm still watching. And I will not back down." Then I folded it and tucked it inside the folder, marking the beginning of a chapter no one else could write but me. I called Emily the next morning. I kept my voice gentle but firm. "Can you stop by the house this afternoon? I need to talk." There was a pause on the other end. I thought she might refuse like she had so many times recently. But then she softly replied, "Hey, around 4 o'clock. Good." I hung up and looked out at the front yard, where the maple trees had begun turning red. Every falling leaf reminded me that some things would never return to the way they were. At 4:15, Emily's car pulled up. She stepped out casually, hair tied back, tote slung over one shoulder, as if she were just running to the store and not facing the mother she tried to write out of existence. "You called me urgently. What's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I led her into the kitchen, where sunlight streamed through the window, casting a long beam across the wooden table. On it sat the folder, the very thing Emily never expected me to find. She saw it instantly. Her expression changed in an instant, though she tried to hide it. Startled. Nervous. "Where did you find that?" I didn't respond. I just placed my hand gently on the folder, grounding myself. "When were you planning to tell me?" "After I'd been moved to a care facility?" "Mom, it's not what you think," Emily rushed out, pulling a chair to sit across from me. "I was just trying to be cautious. You know how people out there take advantage of the elderly. I was protecting you. Protecting Grandma by forging her signature, signing your name on the permanent guardianship forms, and preparing to sell off everything she spent her life building." My voice wasn't loud, but each word felt like it pressed down on the space between us. Emily said nothing. No backtalk, no immediate justifications like always. She just lowered her head, fingers laced tightly under the table. I continued, my eyes locked on the face I used to kiss every morning when she was a child. "I've read it all. Even the emails to the attorney. Even what you wrote about liquidating the house quickly. That's your idea of protecting me." Emily looked up, something in her eyes, part defeat, part coldness. "I didn't think you'd find out this soon." "This soon?" I repeated. "So you really intended for me to never find out?" The door opened. Familiar footsteps echoed down the hall. Brad was home. He took off his coat, spotted us at the kitchen table, his eyes grazing over the folder on the table. No panic. No confusion. "Well," he said, "looks like we need to talk." I looked him straight in the eye. "Good. Let's." Brad sat down, laced his fingers into a neat bridge, trying to look composed like he was about to negotiate a contract. "Cheryl, I know this has made you upset. But please understand we didn't do this out of malice. Older people often don't recognize when they're beginning to decline. A little confusion, a touch of delusion, denial of reality." I couldn't help but let out a dry laugh. "Are you calling me delusional right to my face?" Brad shrugged. "We did speak to a doctor." "What doctor?" "Gregory Niles? The one I've never met?" The one who signed a psychological evaluation that never happened. Brad paused. Then he continued, "You might not remember, but he's been to the house a few times. Maybe you've just forgotten." "Don't use my memory as a cover for your forgery," I said, my voice colder than the frost on the porch. I turned to Emily. "And you? What do you have to say? You weren't forced to sign those documents, were you?" Emily still wouldn't look up. "I just thought, if something happened to you, it would all be taken care of." I nodded slowly. "Then why does the property transfer file say, prioritize selling the original house before November 15th for maximum profit?" Brad cut in for the first time, sounding a little impatient. "You're overreacting. We're family. This was all to protect our shared interests." I stared at him, my tone no longer soft. "Family? The kind of family that snoops through paperwork, forges signatures, secretly emails about selling a house while the legal owner is still alive, still clear-minded, and still cooking meals every day." Brad sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Cheryl, we're tired of handling everything for you. Do you know how many times I've had to pay bills for you because you forgot?" "You mean the June electric bill I purposely delayed to double-check a meter error?" Brad froze. I didn't wait for more excuses. I stood, walked to the kitchen drawer, and pulled out a stack of papers I'd prepared the night before. Bank statements, a formal guardianship waiver, a real copy of my health records. I laid them on the table, looked straight at both of them. "You two have gone too far. And now you're going to pay for every single calculated step. Not with yelling, not with rage. With the law, with the truth, and with things I won't let be erased ever again." Emily bit her lip, her hands trembling slightly. Brad said nothing. No one called me mom anymore. No one mentioned protection. And in the slanting light of the late afternoon slipping through the curtains, I saw clearly, truth always has a voice. Sometimes it just needs someone to stand up and speak. I had stood. And I wasn't stepping back. I sat at my old writing desk all evening, the amber light casting shadows over each page like it was exposing the cracks inside me. Outside, light rain whispered against the windows, wind rustling through the pine trees out back. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years, but never forgot. The call rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Frank Donovan speaking." I pressed my lips together, steadying my voice. "Frank, it's Cheryl." There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then a soft chuckle. "Well, I'll be damned. Cheryl Matthews, you've survived it all, haven't you?" I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "And I'm about to face something bigger than all the rest." His tone shifted. "What's going on?" "I need your help launching a quiet investigation. No one in the family can know. There's forgery, illegal property transfers, and signs of manipulating the law to take over my finances." Frank went silent for a moment, then said firmly, "I'll be there in the morning. 7:30. Don't open the door for anyone else." I hung up, a weight lifting from my chest. In my life, I'd only ever trusted 3 people. My late husband, the old neighbor who now had dementia, and Frank, the man who once helped me keep my grandfather's land from being stolen. The next morning, exactly at 7:30, Frank's old gray SUV pulled up in the driveway. Same car, but his eyes were sharper than ever. I invited him into the kitchen, brewed him a strong cup of black coffee. We sat across from each other in a house that looked peaceful but held too many secrets. I handed Frank all the documents I'd recovered from the bank. He flipped through them page by page, not saying a word for nearly 10 minutes. Only the soft rustle of paper and the ticking of the wall clock broke the silence. Forged signatures. A notary stamp without signature verification. Transfer files missing bank match records. This isn't just a family squabble. This is criminal. I looked at him, my voice gravelly. "I don't want a scandal. Not yet. I just want to protect what I have left, and Lucy." Frank nodded, eyes still on the paperwork. "We'll do 2 things immediately. 1, I'll hire an independent legal analyst to audit every asset in your name over the past 10 years, checking against the transfers and looking for inconsistencies. 2, we'll move your estate into an irrevocable trust, controlled by a neutral third party, not a single family member." I exhaled as if I'd stepped back from a cliff's edge. Frank continued, "I'll also send this to a forensic legal firm to confirm the forgeries. If they confirm it, we can suspend the current documents right away." I nodded, then remembered the most urgent piece. "One more thing. I need to know exactly what they're doing behind my back. Frank raised an eyebrow. You want to track them? I don't need to spy. I just need to know how far they've gone. Have they contacted realtors? Have they moved money into new accounts? I refused to be blindsided again. Frank sipped his coffee, then smiled faintly. Still the Cheryl I remember, calm but never fooled twice in the same spot. I replied quietly, if I fall this time, there won't be anything left for them to stand on. 2 days later, Frank called me into his downtown office. He showed me a scan and email thread between Brad and a real estate agent named Lauren Kim. They plan to list the current house next week. They've already picked out a new one in the southern suburbs. 2 stories, big yard, pool out back, and a home gym. Down payment is under Emily's name. I sat there for a while before nodding. Brad once told me they couldn't afford to fix the kitchen. I paid $12,000 for that 3 months ago. Frank sighed. I also verified this. Over the past year, nearly $80,000 has been withdrawn from your original accounts through power of attorney transactions. Some went into Brad and Emily's joint account. Some went into a sub-account under the name Lucy. I froze. An account under my granddaughter's name? Yes. Possibly to avoid audits or hide transfers. I clenched my fists, struggling to stay composed. Lucy had nothing to do with this. She was only 12. I had to protect her. That afternoon, I went to Lucy's school just after dismissal. I had already spoken with the principal, saying I wanted to take her out for dinner. Lucy came running out, hair brushing her cheeks, her eyes lighting up when she saw me. Grandma. I learned 2 new songs in music class today. I smiled, brushing her hair back with my hand. That's wonderful. You'll sing them for me tonight. But first, there's something I need to ask you. We sat in a small pastry shop near the school. I ordered her a cup of hot cocoa, her usual. Lucy, have Mom and Dad mentioned anything about moving lately? She looked at me, hesitated slightly, then nodded. My parents said we were moving to a new house soon. It's really big, Grandma. It has a pool and even a playroom just for me. I nodded, my voice light as air. And did they say when they'd be moving? Before Christmas. Mom said we'd start the new year in the new house. I clenched my hands under the table. Sweetheart, can you not tell anyone about today? Let's make this our little secret, just between us. Lucy giggled and held out her pinky. I promise. I linked my finger with hers, my heart swelling with a flood of emotions. Love, pain, and resolve. That night, when I returned to my own home and closed the door behind me, I knew one thing for certain. I had just touched the deepest edge of betrayal. But I had also triggered the beginning of my counterattack. And I would not let them push me out of my own life ever again. That afternoon, while I was making tea in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. Frank had arrived earlier than expected. I opened the door and saw him holding a thick envelope, his expression no longer as calm as usual. Is something wrong, Frank? He didn't answer right away. He stepped inside, took off his coat, placed the file on the wooden table, and looked at me for a long moment. I looked deeper into what you asked me to. But I'm afraid what I found goes far beyond what you might be ready to face. I sat down across from him, resting my hands lightly on my teacup. Go on. I can take it. Frank opened the file, flipping through the pages. The first one was a loan summary. Brad is currently in over $230,000 of debt. Most of it comes from high-risk investments he jumped into 2 years ago. The ventures failed. He tried to cover the losses by taking out more loans under the name of a relative, an old uncle on his mother's side who lived in Minnesota. I frowned. You mean, he impersonated someone to open new credit lines? Frank nodded. Exactly. At least 3 of the loan applications used forged signatures. Luckily, that relative passed away recently, and the bank started verifying inheritance claims. That's when the red flags showed up. Around the same time, I looked into the auxiliary accounts you asked about. He handed me a bank statement. I looked at the name printed at the top. Lucy and Matthews. Beneath it was a list of regular deposits spanning the past 8 months from various sources. Each one several $1,000s, some reaching up to $15,000. I read each line slowly, lips pressed tight. Emily opened this account over a year ago, in Lucy's name but with secondary access control. She used it as a money laundering channel, bouncing funds between accounts to avoid bank detection on large withdrawals from their main account. My breath caught. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart. Frank, she's 12. How could Emily? Frank's voice lowered. Using a child's name for laundering isn't uncommon, especially when parents are trying to dodge financial investigations. But this case is especially severe. If the fraud is discovered later, the legal record will show Lucy as the account beneficiary. She could be implicated. I closed my eyes for a moment. A memory of Lucy cuddling her teddy bear beside me the night she had a fever at 4 years old flashed across my mind. She was still so innocent, still unable to fully grasp right from wrong. And they'd used her name as a shield. I won't let Lucy be hurt by her own parents, I said, my voice trembling. Frank's gaze softened. I understand. And I'll do everything I can to protect her. But you need to act quickly, Cheryl. If Brad gets sued, if these debts are exposed in court, all connected accounts will be scrutinized, including Lucy's. I nodded slowly. We need to withdraw every cent from that account. Transfer it to a secure trust under a third-party trustee. And we need to petition for temporary removal of Lucy from her parents' guardianship while this is investigated. Frank exhaled. That won't be easy. But if you're willing to take this to court, at least on the grounds of document forgery and financial misappropriation, we'll have a basis to request emergency guardianship suspension. I went silent, torn inside. I never imagined I'd have to bring my own daughter to court. But I never imagined Emily could use her own child's name to hide crimes either. Do it, I said quietly. I choose Lucy. Frank nodded and shook my hand. He left not long after, and I sat alone by the window as dusk settled. I looked out at the yard where the old swing still creaked gently in the breeze. I remembered when Emily was young. I used to push her for hours on that swing. She once said, "Mommy, I want to grow up fast so I can take care of you." I never thought that taking care of me would one day mean forging my name to sell my home. I got up, opened an old wooden box in the cabinet. Inside were letters from my husband during the war, a scarf Emily knitted in 4th grade, and a scribbled note that read, "I love you more than chocolate cake." I ran my fingers over the words. I had lost Emily. But I would not lose Lucy. And I would not let anyone, under the guise of family, trample on the law, the truth, and an innocent child. I closed the box, stood up, and wrote one sentence in my journal. Everyone has a breaking point. Today, this is mine. I invited Emily and Brad over for Saturday afternoon, 4 o'clock. The kitchen was as calm as ever, but I had cleaned it meticulously, arranged 3 chairs around the large wooden table, and placed a hot teapot in the center. Beneath the table, I'd discreetly taped a voice recorder. Every detail prepared as if I were hosting a board meeting I would now lead, no longer the one being manipulated. Emily came in first. Her eyes were cautious, lips pressed tight. Brad followed, dressed like he was about to pitch a business deal. When his eyes scanned the table, I noticed a flicker of doubt on his face, but he said nothing. "Thank you both for coming," I began, my tone steady, neither harsh nor soft. Emily sat down, blinking repeatedly. "Mom, what's this about?" "I think it's time we speak plainly. No circles. No pretending," I said, looking directly at Brad. He crossed his arms, leaning back. "If this is about you misreading our paperwork." "I didn't misread anything, Brad," I interrupted. "And I'm not here for explanations anymore." I pulled out the file I'd prepared, laying each document on the table like cards ready to be revealed. Proof of transfers from Lucy's account, bank statements showing fraudulent loans, emails discussing asset liquidation. "Where did you get this?" Emily asked, her voice clearly panicked. "Frank. My former attorney," I replied curtly. "The one who helped me keep the land after your father passed. The one I never stopped trusting." Brad raised an eyebrow. "You hired someone to investigate us?" "I'm protecting what's left of my life," I said, locking eyes with him. "You, Brad, lied, forged documents, and dragged my daughter into a scheme that borders on fraud." Emily clenched her fists. "Mom, I didn't want it to go this far." "But you signed," I said firmly. "You put your name on the guardianship papers, the house deed transfer. And you opened a money laundering account in Lucy's name." Brad scoffed, cold and dismissive. "You don't even know how wrong you are about this." I tilted my head, still calm. There's nothing wrong about legally transferring assets into a trust. And I did that this morning. The house, the land, the bank holdings, they're all under independent trust management now. Neither of you can touch a dime. Emily's eyes widened. You moved everything? Even this house? I moved more than that, I said, keeping my gaze steady. I also filed a petition to suspend your guardianship rights and requested full legal review of every signature related to my name. Brad's face turned red. We did all this for you. You're old, you're not. Really? I tightened my grip on the table. You said that while opening fake investment accounts and planning to sell this house to put a down payment on your poolside dream? He jumped up. She told you about the pool? He pointed at Emily, voice cracking. I told you not to say anything about that. Emily went pale, raising her hand to stop him. Brad. Stop. What are you doing? Shut up, he snapped, then turned to me, eyes wild. If you hadn't interfered, we would have had everything. We were about to live properly again. But you just had to cling to everything like you're immortal. I said nothing. I just stared at him, letting him speak, letting the recorder beneath the table do its work. Emily stood, stepping back, lips trembling. Brad, you just said everything. We never meant for her to find out. I finally spoke, my voice soft but clear. It's okay. Already know. I've already recorded everything. And I've sent copies to my attorney. Whatever happens next, the evidence stays. Brad froze. Emily looked like she might collapse. You think you've won? Brad hissed. I'll sue you. What right do you have to strip us of our property? I haven't stripped you of anything, I said. I've simply protected what's mine. You never had a right to any of it. And Emily, she was someone I once loved. But she's not someone I owe. Emily whispered, Mom. I turned and looked at her, my eyes lingering longer than usual. You could have stayed silent before things went too far. But you didn't. And today you let Brad speak for you again. Just like you let him speak in every document you signed. Emily said nothing. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but no one reached out to wipe them. I looked at the two of them. My heart no longer hurt the way it used to, only a sharp, cold clarity remained. I used to believe my daughter would never turn her back on her own mother. I was wrong. And today, at the very least, I can do one thing right. Not let Lucy grow up in a house built on lies. The room fell silent. The ticking of the clock echoed, loud and slow. I stood, adjusted the shawl on my shoulders. The game had changed hands. And I would never let anyone pull the strings again. I was at the kitchen sink, pouring hot water for my second pot of tea, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. It wasn't the familiar hum of a neighbor's engine or Frank's truck. This one was sharp, deliberate, like the presence of a command. I gently set the kettle down and moved to the window, peeking through the curtains. 2 patrol cars sat out front. 3 officers in uniform stepped out. One of them held a blue folder. His walk wasn't rushed, but it wasn't casual either. I opened the door before they had a chance to knock. Good morning, ma'am. Are you Cheryl Matthews? I nodded. Yes. I'm the person you're looking for. A middle-aged officer stepped forward. His name tag read, Officer Lambert. His voice wasn't hostile but firm enough to make clear this wasn't a friendly visit. We received a formal complaint from Mr. Brad Matthews. According to his statement, you are accused of emotional abuse toward your granddaughter, Lucy Matthews, specifically spreading false information and threatening the child's emotional well-being and safety. I didn't flinch. I understand. Please come in. There's something I'd like you to hear. I led them into the living room, already prepared for what I suspected would happen. I placed a laptop on the coffee table, already cued to the audio file I'd recorded during my confrontation with Brad and Emily. I didn't say a word. I simply hit play. In the quiet of the room, every word rang out crystal clear. We're about to have a normal life again. And she just clings to everything like she's immortal. You mean while you open a fake investment account and plan to sell this house for a down payment on one with a pool? We're tired of covering for her. You don't know how many times I've had to pay her bills because she forgot. You think you've won? I'll sue you. What right do you have to steal what's ours? Officer Lambert raised his hand gently, signaling me to pause the recording. He looked at me, then to the 2 other officers behind him. The hardness in his eyes had softened. Matthews, Can you tell me the source of this recording? I recorded it right here in this house, during a completely voluntary conversation with my daughter and son-in-law. They weren't coerced. And it proves who's really trying to manipulate whom. I handed him another folder. Inside were bank statements in Lucy's name, unexplained wire transfers, and letters of inquiry from attorney Frank Donovan. Officer Lambert flipped through the documents slowly, his eyes scanning each page carefully. Finally, he closed the folder and set it on the table, looking at me with a calmer expression. I'm not in a position to make any immediate decisions. But what you've provided is quite clear. If necessary, we'll submit a report to the Financial Crimes Division. What about Lucy? I asked. As of now, we have no reason to believe she's in danger under your care. If concerns arise, Child Protective Services will be notified. But honestly, he paused, then continued more gently, I believe you over the person who filed the complaint. I nodded, keeping my voice even. Thank you. They stood, gathering their papers. As they reached the door, one of the younger officers turned and said quietly, if needed, you can file for a temporary restraining order to protect yourself and your granddaughter. I nodded. I'll consider it. The door closed behind them, leaving the house in quiet once more. I stood still, listening to that silence. Not the kind that once weighed heavy when I feared my memory was slipping, but the kind that follows the release of truth. But I knew Brad and Emily wouldn't stop. Brad moving too soon may have been a mistake, but this bogus complaint about Lucy was clearly calculated. They knew dragging Lucy into it would make me hesitate. They understood my weakness. And now they were trying to weaponize the one thing I loved most. I returned to the coffee table, picked up the cup of tea that had gone cold. I didn't drink. I simply sat down, opened my notebook, and began to write. Day 8. They attacked through the law. I answered with the truth. But more importantly, I wasn't afraid. I looked out the window. Lucy was playing catch with a neighbor girl across the fence. Her voice rang out like silver bells, light, carefree, unaware of the storm circling around her. I silently promised, I'll protect that laughter. No matter what it cost. Even from her own mother. I closed the notebook, stood, and locked the back door behind me. The battle wasn't over. But I had crossed the threshold of fear. I wasn't alone in the dark anymore. That morning, I put on my old gray coat, wrapped myself in the wool scarf Lucy had knitted for me last winter, and walked into Lane County Courthouse, thick folder in hand. My heart wasn't trembling, but it was heavy. Not from fear. Rather from knowing each page I placed before the judge would sever a piece of my own flesh and blood. Frank walked beside me, holding his black briefcase. He didn't speak, only gave me a reassuring glance now and then. He knew this hearing wasn't just about restoring my autonomy. It was about saving Lucy before it was too late. The hearing room was small, lit brightly, paneled in pale wood. Judge Jenkins, an older woman known for being strict but fair, sat behind the bench. I stepped forward, placing my folder in front of her. It contained forged signature evidence, the recording of the confrontation with Brad and Emily, financial documents revealing suspicious transfers from Lucy's account, and medical records confirming I was fully mentally sound. I didn't speak much. I only said what mattered. I'm not here for pride. I'm not fighting for money. I'm here for my granddaughter, a 12-year-old girl thrown into a game she doesn't even know she's part of. I love my daughter. But Emily is no longer the woman who once promised to care for her mother in old age. And I love Lucy. And I will not let anyone, not even her parents, systematically harm her and justify it as planning ahead. Frank followed with the legal points. I didn't understand all the terms, but I understood what I had lived through. And you don't need to be a lawyer to know when something in your family has rotted to the core. Brad didn't attend the hearing. Emily did. She looked pale, lips colorless. When the judge asked if she objected to temporary custody being assigned to me, she only bowed her head and whispered, "No, Your Honor." Judge Jenkins nodded slightly. Based on the evidence presented and in consideration of the best interest of minor Lucy Matthews, the court hereby suspends the guardianship rights of Mr. and Mrs. Brad and Emily Matthews. Temporary custody shall be assigned to Ms. Cheryl Matthews pending further investigation. That sentence, short as it was, felt like a rope pulling me up from the edge of the cliff. Lucy would be safe. As the hearing ended, I looked back at Emily. She didn't lift her head. I saw her shoulders shake. Maybe she was crying. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she knew things were now out of her control. I didn't go to her. I just walked away. That afternoon, I picked Lucy up from school. Her teacher had already been informed. When I appeared at the classroom door, she lit up like always, but her eyes quickly shifted when she noticed my serious expression. "Grandma." I took her hand. "Let's go home, sweetheart." On the way back, Lucy didn't ask much. She simply rested her head on my shoulder, her hand clutching mine the whole ride. That evening, I made her warm milk and let her read on the couch. I set up a spare bed in the storage room next to mine. I folded the blanket carefully, corners tucked in like a soldier's cot. Lucy came in, still holding her worn book. "Grandma, how long will I be here?" I looked into her eyes. "Until everything is made clear. And until you feel safe." She gave a small nod, then stepped forward and hugged me. No more questions needed. 3 days later, I received notice from Frank's office. The court had launched an official investigation into Brad and Emily for forged notarized documents, misuse of a minor's bank account, and federal financial fraud. Both of their personal accounts were frozen. Their credit records were temporarily locked. All transactions related to assets that had once been transferred from me were suspended for investigation. Frank called me, his voice low and steady. "You've won the first round. But they won't stay quiet for long." I stood in the kitchen looking out at the garden. Lucy was watering the plants, wearing purple rubber gloves, quietly humming to herself. "Frank," I said, "as long as that girl is still smiling, I won't let anyone take another step toward her." He replied simply, "Then I'll be the one standing behind you." I hung up, set the phone down on the scratched wooden table. I knew this wasn't over. But I had reclaimed a part of my heart. And more importantly, I hadn't let silence destroy the last sacred thing left within these once loving walls. I stepped into the garden, picked up another watering can, and helped Lucy water the row of lavender we'd planted together last spring. A soft breeze passed through, gentle and fresh. Through all the battles, there's one thing I'll never forget. I'm Lucy's grandmother. And I'll be the one who makes sure her childhood isn't sold off by the same people who once called me Mom. 3 months later, winter had begun to retreat from the backyard, giving way to the first sprouts breaking through the soil Lucy and I had tended. The lavender bushes had started to bud. Weeds were sprouting too, but I didn't rush to pull them out. I wanted Lucy to see that healing doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be real. She now had piano lessons again every Wednesday and Saturday. The old piano in the living room, the same one Emily once learned on before quitting, had been dusted off, retuned, and was now playing simple melodies filled with effort. "Can you hear it, Grandma?" Lucy called out the first time she played a short piece all the way through. I stood in the kitchen, hand resting on the window frame, smiling. "Sounds like peace to me, sweetheart." She beamed, cheeks flushed with excitement. She looked back over her shoulder at me, then turned to keep playing, each note still a little off. But my heart had stopped feeling off-key long ago. We'd built a new weekend tradition. Baking butter cookies, mixing in chocolate chips, and decorating each one with little vanilla frosting smiles. Lucy said, "I want you to always remember we have a reason to smile every week." She probably didn't grasp the full meaning of that, but I did. And I knew that somewhere deep inside she'd already learned something many adults take a lifetime to figure out. Happiness doesn't come from what others give. It comes from what we choose to hold on to. One Monday morning as I was making coffee, our usual mailman knocked on the door and left a thin envelope. I opened it and saw a familiar handwriting. Emily. The letters were still neat, slightly tilted to the right, just like when she was in high school. But the words weren't as cold as the clipped texts from the past few months. "Mom, I don't know where to begin. These past 3 months, every single day has reminded me of what I've lost. Not just the money, but your trust, your eyes when they used to look at me, and Lucy's arms around me. I thought I was doing the right thing. That if you didn't see it, you wouldn't be hurt. I was wrong. You saw it all. And the worst part is, I left you to face it alone. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I still hope, maybe someday you'll look at me like the daughter you once believed in. I'm sorry. No words are enough, but this is where I have to begin." I read every line slowly without once stopping. The letter was thin, but something heavy lingered after each sentence. I folded it, set it on the table, and sat down beside my now cold cup of coffee. I wasn't angry. I didn't cry. I just felt a long silence settle inside me, like an empty chair no one's cleared away yet. That night, after Lucy had gone to bed, I sat at my desk, wrote a short letter, and placed it in a new envelope. I wrote it by hand, not typed. Some things need to be slow, to be honest. Emily, when you're ready to take responsibility instead of placing blame, this door will open again. Then Mom. I didn't include anything else. No explanations. No conditions. I knew that if Emily truly wanted to come back, she'd have to walk that road herself. Not with pity, not with regret. Then I pulled out my journal. The old leather cover was worn, but the pages inside were still clean. I wrote, "Don't let anyone rewrite your life, especially when the pen is in the hands of someone who wants to tear out the last page." I closed the journal and gently blew across the still wet ink. The warm yellow light caught the letters, making them feel carved into my heart all over again. Outside, the early spring breeze carried the scent of fresh earth, and something softer. Maybe it was hope. I don't expect Emily to come back tomorrow. And I'm not sure Lucy will understand it all when she's grown. But one thing I do know, I've held on to the most important thing, my freedom to live truthfully. And no one, no matter what they call me, will ever take that away again. What do you think about my story? If it were you, would you have the courage to stand up when the people you love most push you out of their lives? I wouldn't wish my journey on anyone. But if there ever comes a day when you realize someone's trying to rewrite your life, ask yourself, is the pen still in your hand? Leave a comment below. I want to hear from those who've once been silent, once been hurt, once had to choose between holding on and letting go. And if you saw a part of yourself in this story, or if you simply want to hear more honest, raw moments from real family life, where love can be both shelter and storm, subscribe to this channel. Because life doesn't lack stories worth telling. And sometimes just one story told at the right moment can change everything.